VetNet here at the Institute, the Daniello Institute for Veterans and Military Families. Today, we're going to be talking with two of our very distinguished guests from the veteran military spouse support community. And we're going to be focusing specifically on resumes and a lot of the best practices that are shared out in the community when it comes to this particular population of those that serve. Resumes are always, before we even get into the topic of discussion, we just have a couple housekeeping rules that we like to cover as first. First, if you have a mobile device or you're on a desktop or laptop, please make sure that you're on the mute so that none of the information comes across distorted. So we still have, someone has a hot mic. Yeah, so we can make sure. Cassandra, would you be able to mute everyone that comes across hot?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So again, as I was saying, resumes are one of those topics that when it comes to military job seekers, the fact remains that if you speak to 20 different people about resume preparations, you're possibly going to receive 20 different perspectives. Hell, you might even get more than 20 different perspectives. So today, what we like to do is we're going to focus on some of the best practices for preparing a resume from our well-versed panel members who have years of experience in this particular area. Today, we have the pleasure of having two great allies in the veteran military spouse community. They're also very strong allies of the Onward to Opportunity program as well. And I've had the pleasure of working with both of them for quite a few years in the O2O space. Today, we're going to welcome Noel McCall of Patriots Path and Nikita Wallace of Spectrum Communications. Let's start with Noel, and then from there, we'll move to Nikita. Welcome, Noel.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, Ken and Cassandra and everybody that worked to put this together. Thank you. So a little bit about the background that I bring to the conversation today, which I think is important. As Ken said, I work with a nonprofit called Patriots Path, and we have a career transition program that really focuses on helping military spouses, veterans, service members who are currently in transition, really discern what they want to do next and how they're going to market themselves in that space. And we cover everything from elevator pitches to a lot of really in-depth LinkedIn conversation around resumes and preparing for the interview, questions you may get asked, all the way down to what questions should you be asking and how do you negotiate an offer. So having said that, our program is running year-round. We usually have 1 to 2 courses. They're 20-hour courses per month. And again, I would extend the invitation to anyone that wants to join us. But having said that, with my background as an executive recruiter or a headhunter, I've seen a lot of resumes. I've seen many, probably too many resumes in my lifetime. So I hope that what I can bring to this conversation is a little bit of perspective on what recruiters look for out in the corporate sector, but also the special needs that you all have in translating and explaining the experience and the accomplishments that you have in the best way to put your best foot forward.
Thank you, Noel. It's great to have you with us here today. The next guest is Mr. Nikita Wallace. Simplify, Nikita, welcome.
Simplify, Kenneth. Always a pleasure to be here. Good to see you as well, Noel, Cassandra, and everyone else on the call. So my name is Nikita Wallace. I'm the manager for military talent and attraction here at Spectrum. So in my space, what I do and my team does is we connect with individual veterans and military spouses where they are in their professional space that are transitioning back to the civilian sector, where we provide a white glove service to have a conversation about their resume, their MOSs, their AFSCs, or their rating, and their alignment with one of the 10 business units that we have here at Spectrum. We do this on a day-to-day basis where we have an in-depth, meaningful phone call with them that we've dubbed as office hours, where we go through the resume and we ensure that he or she is aligned with the role that they're applying to within our company, our organization. Not only that, but we offer them balanced feedback on the resume, what they need to improve upon before we actually, accept that resume and send it over to the recruiter and the hiring managers to kind of highlight those soft skills and those intangible traits and qualities that they bring to the table, kind of advocating for them for that role in that position within our organization. So happy
Thank
to
you,
be here.
Nikita. Thank you very much for joining us today. With so much emphasis being placed on digital profiles, such as in LinkedIn, Noel, if you would, can you share with me, is there still any value in actually having a resume?
I believe so. And I believe that it is oftentimes the first and best foot you have to put forward with a recruiter. Will they go and look at your LinkedIn profile? Absolutely. But sometimes that resume is the first impression they have of you. And so having a quality resume is extremely important. The most important part of that resume would be the executive summary at the very top. That sort of pre-organizes the entire story that you're going to tell on your resume. And when I open up a resume online, which I do all the time, all I see of it is above the fold on the first page. So making sure that you have a strong top half of that first page is critically important. Again, it's your first impression in a lot of ways. So making sure that you have a solid storyline throughout your resume is very important as well.
Yeah, and I also believe that the resume it's going to be an outline for your digital profile anyway, right? Should be based off the resume. Nikita,
Absolutely.
in the line of work that you do and all the different candidates that you see, whether military or male spouse or even not really military affiliated, do you still see any value in having a resume when it comes to the digital profile?
I'm glad you brought that to the forefront. Absolutely. I think that resume in hand, it gives us an opportunity to see exactly who they are. So like Noel said, that executive summary, that objective statement should be clear, concise for the role that they're applying to, not the roles that they've accomplished in the past, because those roles may not align with the role that they're applying to that day. So it's a lot of value in having an actual resume in hand or presented to an actual employer or prospective recruiter out there.
Right. I agree with both of you, definitely, hands down. With so much emphasis also on translation of skills, that is probably one of the most important challenges or most seen challenges in the veteran population or even the male spouses for that matter. How would a veteran translate their skills and experience into a resume, Nikita?
I would say first and foremost, they should be, they should remove the military jargon, make it as civilian as possible, sort of that recruiter on the opposite end who may not have served in any branch of the military, have no military affiliation whatsoever, can actually understand the correspondence to what they've done on active duty, to what they align with here at this particular, organization. Another thing is making sure that, those skills that they have, they capitalize on those quantifiable facts and those soft skills too as well for that particular role.
Yeah, that seems to be very important at this time. So Noel, I have a question for you, and I know you're going to knock this out of the park because I've worked with you and I know. I recently looked at my own personal resume and I came to the conclusion that, you know what, you've been retired 10 years. So technically my military career is just about to fall off the 10-year window for my resume, right? So what would you say, Noel, are some of the key elements that should be mentioned in a resume to impress either a recruiter or even a hiring manager?
I think in getting back to the question that Nikita was answering too, I think it has bearing on this. We as recruiters don't necessarily need to know the specifics of what you do on a daily basis in the military or what you did back then, right? So this could apply, Ken, to what you're doing now and what you did 10 years ago. It's more about how did you move the needle? How did you make a difference when you were in that job? So for example, you might want to say, I was a truck driver. I drove long distances. I hauled heavy loads. I, kept a log. That's just describing what you did. But if you can say how you did it well, if you can say, save the company $15,000 by finding a more fuel efficient route, or, trained 20 other drivers while I was there, or, coming in and saying I had the best safety record. Those are the things that no matter what job I'm looking to hire you in, they're going to matter. If you can save my company money, I want to talk to you. If you have a good safety record, I want to talk to you. If you can train other people, I want to talk to you. Even if what you've been doing when you accomplished those things was military in scope, and what I'm hiring you to do is not military, describing your accomplishments and how you move the needle. The A and the R part of that STAR theory or PAR theory, right? The action and the result. Many people put the action, I was responsible for training, but they don't say resulting in how many, right? So in getting back to that, I think translating your accomplishments is in many times easier to do in civilian language than it is to translate what you did specifically. So for that, I would make sure, Ken, like in your example, you want to get that information on there at some point. You may just not be able to flesh it out as much because it's going to fall to that second page, and you don't want your resume to be any longer than 2 pages. So focus on the accomplishments. And if you need to build that military information back in there, allude to it or reference it to in your executive summary on page 1.
Great information. Nikita,
Yeah.
what were some of the skills or responsibilities or accomplishments highlighted on a resume that would kind of set you apart from the competition? Because we know this is a very competitive thing here, just applying for a role. What are some of the things that you would want to highlight to indicate a differentiator or set you apart?
Yeah, I definitely want to highlight those leadership and management skills. And I always tell a veteran to always look back at, those leadership principles and those leadership traits. Those are some key qualities that they can, kind of highlight in their resume: being dependable, being decisive, having integrity, being a responsible person that will show up on time, those who take initiative. Those are just some of the key things that I like to see on a resume. And those are some of the things I like to highlight too as well when I send those resumes over to the individual recruiters and the hiring managers. There are some things we can't get around. There are requirements, and there are preferred things that are on those requisitions. If they have the requirements, obviously they're going to meet the requirements for the roles, like having a bachelor's degree or equivalent years of experience. But what's going to set you apart from everyone else is highlighting, once again, I always go back to the intangible traits and qualities, and especially those leadership and management skills, because those are things you're not taught in college, but those are things that veterans traditionally have many years of experience in.
Yeah, that's a very good point as well. So, Noel, you mentioned the STAR statement and you put emphasis on the A and the R. When it comes to the R, there's something referred to as quantifiable and qualitative. Can you kind of go over that a little bit and just give us a little bit more emphasis on the qualitative and quantitative?
Yeah, I think quantitative and qualitative are interesting. They both are important. I'll start with the numbers-based measurement. If you all can say, I increased it by 60%, or I decreased expenditures, increased readiness by a certain amount, the numbers, the percentages and the numbers will draw the eye, and they make it very clear that you move the needle in a certain direction, in a positive direction. The qualitative is more about how did you improve the situation, and it may not be numerically based. And I would say, if you were able to improve something or you made a difference, but you weren't able to really quantify it with numbers, that's fine too. Increased is, it's not as good as increased by 60%, but we can't always put numbers on things. So showing how you actuated a result is really what we're looking for as recruiters, because we're hiring you to actuate a result on our end too. So speaking to that in both contexts is very helpful for us.
Thank you very much. And this question I actually have for both of you. All right. Should your resume be time-based or should it be experience-based? We'll start with you, Noel, since you just spoke.
Not experience-based. We do not want a functional resume. This is something a lot of folks, if they've had a long career in one place, want to draw the distinction and say, here's my executive summary, and I'm going to tell you all the experience I have in human resources and all the experience I have in leadership and all the experience I have in data management. That is a functional resume. You're describing the different functions that you've had within different jobs and the amount of experience in each one. That is frustrating for a recruiter because we still need to know, but where did you do that? And how long were you there? That kind of information. So falling out of that functional resume format back into what we call a chronological resume, where you start at the top with the job you're in right now or the job you had most recently, and then working back, it allows me as a recruiter to see how long were you there? What was your job title? Were you moved up? Did you have any kind of promotion? And I mean promotion in terms of change of responsibility in an upward direction, not necessarily promotion in rank. But we want to see that. We want to outline the experience, and giving us a chronological resume is much more helpful. If you really feel like you need to draw attention to those functional pieces, you can use functional headlines for each of your bullets underneath those examples of different jobs that you had. I know that sounds a little complex, but there's a way to bring the best of both worlds together.
Yeah, thank you, Noel. Nikita, would you like to elaborate on that, or if you have anything you want to add?
I mean, Noel said it all, but I totally agree with the chronological resume. I mean, many times I see these functional resumes that come across and they're just vomiting a lot of information on paper and they want to present it and then they wonder why they don't get selected for the position or the role. Because it's not really answering the question. It's not really answering the mail. And what a lot of veterans don't understand, or military spouses, or even applicants don't understand, especially when they apply for a role with our company, we're not using a resume reader. Someone is actually physically taking your resume and looking at it, So a chronological resume, in my opinion, is always clear and concise. And like you said, starting with your latest and greatest position that you're in right now, it tells us a story, it gives us a story. If you've been promoted within that role, your duties, your responsibilities, the whole nine. But I would agree, a chronological resume is the best way to go. I would stay away from functional resumes.
And if I might jump back for a second, Ken, I will say, if you guys really are married to that functional presentation, use some of that language and breaking down those different things within your executive summary. That way we see the three different areas, the HR, the data analysis, the three things I mentioned. You're going to bring that together in that executive summary, but make sure that the body of your resume is still chronological.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And those are all valid points. Nikita, I want to go back to you on this one. Let's say you have some parallel careers. How would you present parallel careers to have the best impact for a particular resume that you're trying to draft?
That's always a tough one. And I saw that in the chat. I think this gentleman was a civilian and a reservist at the same time. So that's always a tough one. I would say just make sure your experience, your education, the whole nine definitely aligns with that position, that role. But that's always a tough one out there for me. I see a lot of reservists who apply for roles here. It's really about just being really clear and concise when writing that resume for that position. So, but that's a tough one. That's one I struggle with at times. That's sometimes we probably take a day or two to work with that individual to help them make the correlation to the position in the role. But sometimes we find that those reservists may have the experience, but they just don't really know how to articulate it. Because keep in mind, the training is exactly the same. You may not do it, 28 days or 31 days out of the month. The training is exactly the same, whether you're active duty or reserve. So don't discount that. Don't take it away. Don't dilute it. Just understand, you just want to be able to make the same correlation, to what you've done as a reservist, whether it's 1 week in a month, 2 weeks or over summertime, or, in everyday life on active duty. So, but that's a tough one I've seen in the past. It usually takes us, 2 or 3 days when we help that person rewrite that resume before we submit it up to that hiring manager or the recruiter too as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now I like to go to the chat and fall back on a quote that Robert put into the chat. Robert said that resumes are not static. They need to be tailored to fit the job that you are applying for. They need to be targeted and tailored for a particular role, Noel. Yeah. Noel, can you share in your experience what happens when you get a resume that is not even tailored to the job description?
I usually don't even read it. But I will try. I think that what you want to communicate in your resume, and everybody says targeted resume, and you think to yourself, oh my gosh, I have to rewrite it from scratch to make it fit exactly what's being said in the position description. Not necessarily.
Right.
Don't discount all the wonderful skills that you have in addition to the things that you bring to the job that are relevant to what they're seeking. Don't take everything else off to only plug in the language you think they want to see. I encourage my students to write a 3-dimensional resume, talking about maybe 3 different areas. Again, I get back to that triple threat. What are 3 areas of strength that you bring to the table? Because if I'm hiring for an HR manager, but I see that you also have data analytics and you also have project management, that makes you a stronger candidate. It doesn't make you I'm throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what'll stick. It shows that you understand you bring more than just one thing to the table. And I think when people talk about tailoring their resumes, they err too far on the side of, I need to create a one-trick pony visual, right? You don't want to be a one-trick pony. You want to bring in the scope of what you have to offer, but you need to highlight the things that were referenced in that job description. If the job description is French, You need to put some French words on your resume. That's the bottom line, but it doesn't mean take off all the German, because the German might actually come in handy too.
Yeah, that is awesome. I like that analogy, Noel. I know in the O2O curriculum, one of the things that I taught my students was the areas that you're being evaluated when you're being considered for a role. The intellectual quotient, your knowledge, the emotional quotient, how do you get along with others, the resiliency quotient, how do you bounce back from failure, and then your social quotient, how do you get along with other people as well. So let's talk about military awards, because military people, a lot of times all time, your resume is on the top left of your uniform. People can look at your uniform and they can see everything that you have done. How can we take those awards and integrate them into our resume?
You want me to take it, Noel? Because I'll be honest. I don't like seeing the awards on the resume. I don't think it has any relevance out here in the civilian sector. I think about all the awards I received in 23 years in the Marine Corps. I didn't put any of those on my resume whatsoever. They had no bearing on me obtaining any job or any position or getting promoted to the next rank. You could put a Bronze Star with a Combat V, but what does that really mean when you come out here in the civilian sector? That you're a warfighter. Guess what? They believe we're all warfighters, regardless of what branch of the military we're in. So I don't like to see the awards on there. I think that's really a lot of fluff, and it means absolutely nothing out here in the civilian sector. You got a good conduct, and guess what? We expect you to have a good conduct because you're supposed to have that discipline when you're on active duty, right? So that should automatically transition out in the civilian sector. And then we all got you got sea service deployment, you got all these different awards, but they don't make a correlation to what you do, here in the civilian sector. So me personally, I don't like seeing the awards on the resume. I think the resume should once again be clear and concise, whether you tailor it to the position that you're applying to, or if you're making a functional, chronological, whichever you prefer. But I do not like seeing awards on the resume because I don't think it really helps your case.
Yeah. So coming from an executive headhunter perspective, Noel, what is your viewpoint on that?
I think I agree. I don't usually look towards the awards. If you do have an award that you have earned, some you earn, some you win, right? Depending on what it is. But if you have an award that's very important and you need to draw attention to the fact that you, have extreme excellence in that space, include it into one of your bullets. You can always say, attained this award for doing this, that, and the next thing, right? You need to explain it. For example, you just talked about a Bronze Star. Most civilians, no clue. So we know it's important. We see it and we go, wow, that's kind of cool. But we also don't want to only picture you as a veteran. We want to picture you as one of our employees. And our employees may not, be earning Bronze Stars, right? So it's helpful. It's important. Please, I don't want anybody on this call to think that all the hard work you've put in and all the accolades and everything that you've done is not important to us. It absolutely is. But the verbiage and the space on that resume is so limited that unless it's something you really want to draw attention to that's relevant to the job at hand, and you want to put it in as a bullet, I would not do it. I have heard folks say that they have a separate sheet of paper that has all of their awards on it, and they don't make it part of the resume. But if they happen to be in an interview scenario and someone says, oh, you served, so did I. What all did you do? And then if you want to pull it out and show it to them, that's fine. But I would not make it part of the resume.
Thank you for your input on that. So when it comes down to job announcements or job descriptions, we know that, they're a dime a dozen, and some of them can be very inclusive and others can be very exclusive. But one of the key things that you are going to be expected to provide in your resume is some sort of keyword that is related to the job description or the job announcement. Are you aware of any tools, Nikita, that our audience members can use to just really measure how detailed or specific their resume is when it relates to a particular job description?
Yeah, so I would tell you, ONET's always a great go-to for those who have utilized it before in the past, but some of the career sites that you apply to, and we're about to add it to ours, we do have a military skills translator. That works. It's going to work perfectly. It's not only is it going to help identify what roles you align with based off your MOS or your rating and your background or your AFSC. But it'll tell you exactly what openings are available in the location that you're looking into as well. So that's one. We also have what we call Fit Finder that's actually live on our career site now. My drawback to Fit Finder is this: it's a very long survey, so to speak. We've get the data, we've done the math. Traditionally, those who complete it, I think is about 90% females. Most of the men, once they get to about, question number 6 or 7, they quit, but it's really a great tool to help you align with a role within our company, our organization. For example, if you're 11 Bravo and 0311 and infantryman, you're probably thinking like, what can I really do outside of becoming a cop? You know what? Depending on skill sets, training, and other things that you've done in your past life and education, completing that on Fit Finder will help you align with a role and a position within our company, our organization. And also help you make a determination on, how you should, write a targeted resume for that requisition you're looking at that point in time too as well. So.
Thank you, Nikita. Noel, I have a good one for you. Knowing that the Onward to Opportunity program is a certification program, we provide professional industry-specific certifications for transitioning service members, veterans, male spouses, and members of the Guard and the Reserve community. Let's talk about certifications. How valuable are certifications when it comes down to you developing your resume?
That's a tough one, Ken, because I'm going to say they're awesome because I'm going to support you on this, and they are. But I think the better answer to this is it depends. It depends on the job that you're applying for. A lot of folks say, I need to have certification. I'm going to go get that PMP. But if I have a chance to talk to them and they tell me they're really interested in working in human resources, I might redirect and say, well, get the HR certification, get your PHR, right? Some companies look for the certification in order to hire. So it's very, very important. If you're looking at entry-level positions or those mid to lower level positions where you're just getting a foot in the door, certification is extremely helpful. Later on in your career, you'll look back and you'll say, well, do I have the experience? That's what really matters. So as you start talking to people in the industry, your industry of choice, you can say to them, what certifications do you look for? Right? When you make hires, don't say this to the employer that you're interviewing with, right? But people who you're having these informational interviews with, and just say, so tell me a little bit about what certifications are most important, and you will get different answers from different companies. But again, sometimes it's not the certification that gets you the job, but it could be the certification that gets you the promotion. It's never a bad thing to get certification. It is always good, and you'll always lean into that and you will always use it, but make sure you choose your certification appropriately and thoughtfully so that it is something you truly are interested in, right? I think a lot of folks get out of the military and they say, well, I'm a project manager, I got to have my PMP. That may not be the best thing for them, right? So take the time to do some evaluation. What types of jobs you're really interested in doing? Where do your interests lie? And then make sure that the certification supports that. If you look at a certification program, you're like, oh, that's going to be hard. And I'm going to dread every day of it. Get a different certification. You got to make sure that it speaks to your heart because it is in a huge way going to determine your trajectory. So think about that and think about something you'd really enjoy doing. And if you'd enjoy doing it, then it's the right certification for you. And they do become important, especially when you've got, 2 candidates running neck and neck. One has the certs, one doesn't. Sometimes it does come into play.
Well, since we're on certs, and I have a caveat just to add on to this question that just popped up in the chat, Noel. Is it recommended to even put an expired certification on the resume or a certification that you are currently pursuing but have not yet completed?
I love the "it depends" answer, but it does. So I'll explain myself here a little bit. If it has expired, but it has expired very recently, then you may still want to put it on there, but make sure that it's relevant, right? A lot of what you put on your resume or don't put on your resume comes down to relevancy, right? Even with the awards we talked about, it has to be relevant. If you have a certification that you can get again, sit for that exam, re-up for that cert, then yes, you can put it on as long as it hasn't been, like 5 years since it expired. There are some that are so they change every day, right? Like a lot of the IT certs, you may get it one day, but the test changes the next week. Those are the ones that I'd be a little more thoughtful about saying, well, it expired in 2019. That's a lifetime in IT, right? So it does matter. That's why I said it depends. There are some certifications that I probably would not put on there if they'd expired. But again, it depends on the timing. With regards to whether or not to put something on your resume, if you don't have it yet, if you're close enough that you can see it, right? You can reach out and touch it, even if you don't have it yet, then yes, put it on your resume, because I know how long the hiring process takes. And I know that if I see your resume, it may be another 2 months before your butt is in the chair in my office, actually doing the job. So in those 2 months, if that's a time period in which you're going to achieve that certification, please let me know. Because if you have to have that PMP to get the job, and you don't have it anywhere on your resume, even though you're like less than a month away from, anticipated certification, I'll never know you have it, and that you will have it by the time I hire you. So if it's not too far out, go ahead and put it on there and put anticipated certification this date. With a degree, it's the same thing. Anticipated graduation date. Now, if it's anticipated graduation 2025, no, that's too far out. Okay. But if you're going to say anticipated graduation in June of 2023, yes, please put it on there. I know you've put in 4 years of work or however many years of work to do that. It's also very important to me as a recruiter to know that you have the ability to go to school and work at the same time. And if I see that you are working on a degree and you're doing a full-time job, that's a feather in your cap. And I appreciate that. So there is some value to putting it on there, even if you don't yet completely have it.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think all of those are valid points, and I've heard a lot of them before. So thank you for that great information. So Nikita, I got one that is very unique and it applies to you because I know you can speak to this here.
Yeah.
Let's talk about military education. And how do you integrate military education into your resume? I was an EEO rep when I was in the Army, and
Right.
that was something that I did. How can I integrate that into my resume?
It's funny you say that, Ken, because I have a good friend of mine who was retired out of the Marine Corps, and he wanted to come here and be he wanted to do D&I, and I think you and I actually talked about that role when it opened up at one point in time. And, and I told him, I said, listen, man, what you've done on active duty as a career recruiter, like you and I have done, Ken, and we both have done the Family Readiness Officer, EEO, he took a D&I class through Cornell University, got a certification for that. You have to really take a holistic approach when you start thinking about, your military education, if it's upper level, lower level, and it's equivalent to the civilian sector too as well, So you got to think of it like, okay, here's my military education. If I was to take this training over to a post-secondary school out here to some college or university, would they actually give me credit for it? Yay or nay? You got to really, honestly, you got to be, you have to truly be honest with yourself as far as the qualifications and the training that you receive. Some of those classes that we've taken on active duty, they equate to, a 100 level course, a 200 level course, a 300, 400, 500, whatever it may be with a college or university of choice. But you have to understand what you've done on active duty and if it honestly translates to, something that's equivalent into the civilian sector. I use Air Force as a prime example. Many of the training that they have that's not an inter-service school that they receive is backed and supported by the Air Force Community College. That can transition over into the civilian sector a lot easier than what I've received as a United States Marine and in college and some of the training that I have. Now, if I take my time as a career recruiter and we receive public speaking from the University of San Diego, I was able to take that same training and courses, and use that towards my bachelor's degree in the past because, it was actually taught from the University of San Diego out at the schoolhouse, and we actually received a certification and training to say, hey, this is equivalent to 3, 4, 5 credit hours towards a bachelor's degree, as far as one of my core classes. But I would say when you look at your military training and how it, corresponds in the civilian sector, you really have to take a holistic approach in it. I mean, I have so many people who come out and say, hey, I've done this on active duty. I was a project manager, in the Army. I'm like, okay, give me the identifying code for a project manager. What is that MOS? Well, it's not an MOS. Then you're not a project manager. Do you have a PMP? Do you have that certification? You know, you have the experience, but can you speak to that? Can you tell me about, you know, when you oversaw projects from cradle to the grave, can you speak to that eloquently in an interview? If you can't, don't say that you were a project manager on active duty unless you can speak the language and the lingo, because then you just look like an imposter who made it to the interview stage, you know, and it kind of dilutes you as a person, you know, trying to onboard with our organization. But I'd say you just really got to take a holistic approach and looking at what you've done on active duty and what it's equivalent to. And I would say I would start at the SMART transcripts, because that's what I do all the time. I mean, I looked at my SMART transcripts the other day, finishing up my master's. I was like, let me just see what I did in Marine Corps and what's it equivalent to. And I was like, oh, it was nothing, you know. I mean, it was the correspondence courses you took here and, you know, formal leadership schools. I got credit for that, you know, for public speaking and leadership and management skills and all that great stuff. That transferred right over into the civilian sector. That was awesome. But some of the other training that I received in Marine Corps, you know, it was equivalent to absolutely nada out here in the civilian sector. So you really have to, you know, take a holistic approach. I would say start at your SMART transcripts, you know, and then see if it says upper or lower level or, you know, no credits or whatever, and see if that would transition out into the civilian sector. But other than that, you have to really be honest with yourself as far as those qualifications. And I honestly do get a lot of individuals who come to me, say, hey, I want to be a project manager, just going back to that. And I'm like, okay, you know, there's associate project managers, there's project managers, and there's senior project managers. Which one would you like to apply to? Oh, I'm a Navy captain, so I would only apply to a senior project manager. Okay, sir, tell me about your time. Tell me about your experience in the telecommunications field that's equivalent to 10 to 15 years. Well, I don't have that. Well, then I would suggest that you apply for the associate project manager role, because it's 0 to 2 years experience in that field. Now, mind you, a lot of us as veterans, we get caught up with, you know, the title, you know, because that title, associate versus senior, is just not as appealing. And you're like, well, I should only be a senior because I was senior on active duty, but you didn't start off there. You started here and you worked your way up and you progressed throughout the ranks, right? And it's okay to start off as an associate project manager, because as a veteran here, you know, they're going to identify the skills that you have. You're part of that mentorship program. You'll get promoted to project manager and senior project manager. But if you try to start off at the very top, you have no education in the industry, it's going to really hurt you later on down the road when you get into that position. So,
yeah, thanks a lot, Nikita. And that's a great point. Identifying the proper entry point is, I mean, that is so important, and you got to be able to do that. You got to know where you have the greatest possibility to excel. So, Noel, there's a question in the chat, and I think this is ideal for you as well. Many HR job opportunities ask for knowledge and systems that the military did not have. Should I still apply for that job if most of or all of the other requirements and experiences are met?
Yes. I think a lot of people look at job descriptions, you know, the ads that say, hey, we're hiring. And they look through and they say, well, I don't meet all the criteria. I should not apply. Other people look at it and go, I don't meet any of that, but it sounds fun. I'll apply. So you get both ends of that spectrum. But most people will be very thoughtful about whether or not to apply. And I will say for most of you, as you look at the position descriptions, and HR is a very good example. If you read through and you hit about 75% of it, then go ahead and apply. But you need to be very ready to talk about the HR systems you do know, because a lot of times they will translate. They may say, you know, you have to have PeopleSoft if you're going to come into our HR department. Well, take a look at the systems and outline them, and specifically how you use them and what they accomplished and what they were meant to do, the systems that you have used, and then sit down with some people in HR who have PeopleSoft and say, tell me a little bit about that software and see where the overlaps are. That's where it's important for you, because if you go in and you say, I don't have it, but hire me anyway, that's not a good look. But if you say, I don't have it, but I've done some research and I see how these can overlap, and I'd be thrilled to get the certification in that so that I do know, that's very proactive. And that's much sexier to an employer to go, oh, you're working on it. I understand. You know your foibles, right? Know thyself. So I think that if you don't have everything they're asking for, you can still apply, but don't leave it at that. Go back and look at how you can get what they need, if at all possible, or how what you've done does in some way equate to what they're looking for. And that takes a little bit of legwork. But if you're really committed to working in human resources, it's worth it, right? And you may have, back to something Nikita was saying, in project management, for example, you may have project management experience, but can you talk the talk? Can you talk about being a Scrum Master? Can you use the terminology that they use when they talk about project management? You'll get a lot of that when you do the certification. You'll get a lot of that when you start going to PMI chapter meetings. You'll get a lot of that in your informational interviews. So don't discount sitting down outside of you interviewing for a job, sitting down with someone in that industry and getting their input, because you don't know, maybe one of those HR systems you used is very similar to PeopleSoft. You just need to be able to address it thoughtfully.
Excellent point. Yeah. When I spoke about the intellectual quotient earlier, the IQ consists of your training. It consists of your experience. It consists of any certifications that you may have. But more importantly, it also consists of your business acumen. So even if you have a certification in a particular specialty, you may still have a business acumen gap. So you need to make sure you take the time to increase your level of business acumen as well. So Noel, another one for you. I know you've seen this. Let's just say I'm a male spouse and I have so many employment gaps. What are some of the things that I could do to cover that?
I would say, if it's job jumping, so you were here for 2 years, here for 2 years, here for 2 years in different jobs because you were following a spouse through their career, make sure that you don't shy away from listing the locations. That will help us understand if they're all in one city, I'm going to go, why did you change jobs? But if they're in different states, different parts of the country, different parts of the world, I'm going to make a little bit of, I'm going to connect some dots there. I'm going to go, okay, something was happening here. You can reference in your top paragraph. I wouldn't lead with it, right? But you can reference in there, having had a number of experiences due to a military spouse's, continual movement, has this much experience or has this many different opportunities or has gained experience across a lot of different industries. You can reference that in that first paragraph, but make sure that what you do below when you're actually listing the jobs is make sure that you list very thoughtfully what you accomplished in that short period of time and where those jobs were. If it was an interim job, write the word interim. That explains the short term, right? If it's a part-time job, put that. If it's a contract job and it was supposed to end after 6 months, then put contract. Give us, the reader, the recruiter, some inside information as to why it was so short-lived. And the second part of the question, I think, Ken, is if you have just a flat out gap, right? What I would encourage you all to do, and there's no easy answer for this, but sit down and think of a couple of things. Was there any time in there that you were a student? You can use that as a filler, full-time student, right? Was there any time in there that you were volunteering for a year-long project? Maybe you were on an HOA board, but you were managing a specific project. You don't want to make out, you just don't want to create things out of thin air and create fluff, because we see right through that. But if you can thoughtfully talk about the experience you gained in that, and it was longer term and there was a mission to be met, and you can talk about how you got there, put it on your resume. That is totally fine. We understand. It still speaks to the talent you bring to the table. If it's a time that you took off and you said, no, I didn't. I mean, I spent time with I took care of an aging parent, right? And there was nothing else I could do in that space because I was taking care of them. One of the nice things I've seen on a resume is someone that said, chief work-life balance officer, that kind of thing, which was a little cheesy. Down below that, it said, taking a break from work to spend quality time with family, grateful to have had this opportunity. That told me, the reader, that it was their choice to take a break. They had not been fired. They had not been downsized. They chose to take the break. And that was a much better look on the resume to say, thankful to have had this opportunity. A lot of folks got laid off during COVID, and being able to say, stayed on with the organization until COVID got to be, too tough, and then took a break due to COVID, but spent time getting a degree or getting a certification. You can fill those gaps creatively, but it's kind of a person by person answer, I think, Ken. So,
yeah, I think there's a lot of validity with the answers that you provided. And April put in the chat that you can look into returnships. There are companies right now that focus on individuals who have had legitimate career gaps as well. So this is a level of equity that's being implemented and integrated into the employment process, specifically for people that fall into this particular area. So thank you for your input, and thank you as well, April. So as we come towards the end of our, oh, another question just popped up. Let's see.
There's more interesting.
Yeah, the MBA question. Okay. Are recruiters more interested in applications that show continuous training? For example, I have an MBA, but should I add on additional certifications such as accounting or IT, since many jobs are looking for that in in the HR market? You want to hit that, Nikita? So
yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Ken. I would say, and just going back to one of the things Noel said too as well, be careful when you're writing your resume. Don't put a lot of fluff in there. When we do these resume screenings with these individuals, I talked to a gentleman that was 11 Bravo for 20 plus years. He got his MHR, and he wanted to be a director of human resources. So I asked him, I said, well, can we make the alignment? Can you tell me, when you were in charge, as a 42 alpha, 45 alpha, whatever it may be at any given point in time. He just, he started giving me a lot of fluff. He obviously got his MHR. He knew, everything about human resources. I asked him about protective classes, asked him about FMLA. He knew the answers, and that was great. And I asked him another question, just veteran to veteran. I was like, tell me about a time when, that applied to your current position, and he kind of fumbled the ball. I'm like, man, we don't have FMLA. We don't deal with protective classes on active duty. That's not something we do. And that's going to be a question they ask you in the interview. Just say you've never dealt with that before, don't shoot for the director of HR, go for a generalist. A generalist will let you get your feet wet. As an HR generalist, you're an understudy for that manager or that director of HR, where you can then, take over the world from there. Don't automatically just shoot for the stars because of, what your current position is on active duty. But your question again, Ken, I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure I got that out too as well.
Yeah, it was about stacking additional training.
Yeah, I don't foresee, I see a lot of individuals who apply for HR roles here with our organization, and none of it asks for any additional certifications for accounting or anything like that. When you're dealing with HR with us, you're either a generalist, manager of HR, director of HR. We have an entire accounting department downstairs on the second floor, who's actually ran by a former Navy Chief Warrant Officer as well. So I don't foresee you having to stack any certifications or anything like that. No, obviously having your PHR, SPHR, and all that thing, all of that is great, but any additional certifications like C++, A+, anything like that, I don't think it's necessary unless it's a requirement listed on that requisition, for that role. So, but no, I don't see that being a benefit unless, you differ from that, Noel. I don't know.
I do a little bit. Thank you for tossing the ball over here, because I was kind of squirming. I was thinking, at a senior level, at an executive level, and that's the search work that I've done traditionally. I do look for a smattering of knowledge in other areas. So I do think that it can help. Now, if it's something that is completely irrelevant, like C++, I'm not going to need that in an HR executive, right? But the accounting, maybe I could say, you know what, that really helps, because if that HR executive gets called into a budget conversation, now we have some relevance. So it depends on the level, and it depends on whether or not that particular qualification or certification will ever come into play. But I think, again, trying not to be a one-trick pony for every time you apply, you change everything around. Think of who you are holistically and which of those certifications you want to continue to use. The MBA is going to stay on there regardless, right? But if you have a cert in how to train people in archery, you can probably take that one off unless you're going to work for a summer camp, and then you put it back on. So I think that there are times that you would want to stack those, but they have to be relevant, and they have to be things that are of interest to you. If you don't want to do them again, don't put them on your resume.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, as we approach the ending of our presentation here, there's a question on how to get in touch with Noel's program. So Noel, if you would like to just share the information, I can put it at patriotspath.org. I think that's proper, right?
Yeah, it's Patriots-Path. So,
Patriots-path.org. Okay, that is the link to get in touch with Noel and actually enroll in the Patriots Path program. It's an excellent program. We send a significant amount of O2O participants over the Patriots Path just to help polish them up a little bit and get them ready for that environment. So as we move towards closure, we'll start with Nikita and then we'll end with Noel. Any final points you would like to share with the audience before we take off?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ken. I would tell anyone that's applying for any role with any company or organization, there's a couple of things you need to do. I always highly recommend, especially with my organization, if you're applying for a role with us, apply directly on our career site. Don't utilize a third-party career site. That's first and foremost. Secondly, take the opportunity to read about us, who we are and where we come from. You know, I think that's important too as well. I connect with a lot of people over the phone. I just did it this morning. A male spouse, she sent me an email because I was a little late for our call running over on the first one. And when I called her directly, I was like, hey, this is Nikita with Spectrum. I was like, just reaching out to you to connect with you. She's like, with who? And I'm like, with Spectrum. You set this call up, you know, for us to have a conversation about the company and organization. Do you know anything about us? Did you apply with us? She's like, I think I did. I'm not sure. And I was like, all right, well, I attempted to find her within the ATS. Her information wasn't in there. I would say do your due diligence on the company and the organization. Remember who you're applying with and the role that you're actually applying for. So many people just go out here and they just, you know, they shoot a scatter. They scatter so many resumes with so many different companies and organizations. They're not exactly sure who they're applying with. Understand, you know, our community impact, and it's probably with all organizations that are out there. And then also understand, you know, our military affiliation too as well. A lot of companies will tell you they're military friendly. I like to say, or veteran friendly. I like to say we're veteran forward because not only do we want to hire you, but we want to promote you and retain you too within the company and the organization. We're not looking just to get a check in the block for, you know, any type of tax breaks or anything like that. We are truly a strong organization when it comes to veteran representation. 9,000 veterans, so that's 9%. But out of that 9%, 10.7% of those are in leadership roles within our organization. So please, if you want to connect, don't hesitate to reach out, you know, to have some conversations about Spectrum and the opportunities that we have here too as well.
Thank you, Nikita. And when you get a chance, just put your email in the chat. Someone's requesting that. So at this point, we'll go and transition over to Noel.
I think one of the most important things that I like to hear from people is why they want to do something. And if you can't speak to why you want the job, why you're interested in it, why you think you'd be a good fit, that's tough for us.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that it's more about taking a look at the jobs that you've enjoyed the most. What were you doing when you were having the most fun in those jobs? Make sure that's the thing you get to do moving forward. And please don't come in and say, well, I just want to help people and I want to be a leader. I want to lead teams and I want to solve problems and I want to help people. And so does everybody. That's not specific enough. The example I give is if somebody says, I like to help people. Do you like to help people by being a resource? Do you like to help people by being hands-on, helping them solve it in the moment? Do you like helping people by training them how to, you know, solve their own problems moving forward? Helping people means different things to different people. So if you come out with, I like to teach, I like to lead, I like to help, be more specific. Think about why you want to do those things. What part of it is most important? And if you can speak to that, that'll help you on so many fronts. It'll help you determine the specific jobs you should be applying for, and it'll help you in the interview and when you're writing your resume, because that sparkle in your eye means the world. And if you don't have it, you need to figure out a way that you can apply for something where you will have that sparkle in your eye, because it matters a lot. And a lot of that, I really love doing this. That can beat out a certification any day. That can beat out education any day. I can train you how to do it. But if you have a passion for this kind of thing and your heart's in it, I'll hire you. So just remember, you got to find that for yourself before you move forward.
Thank you so much. Very powerful statement. Today, we covered so many different areas, a lot of great questions, a lot of excellent dialogue about resumes and, you know, how to just make sure we can put our best foot forward. But the number one thing that came out of this is that you have to put in some work. You have to do your research. You have to have those informational interviews. You have to research the companies that you are looking to go forward to. Even if you go to a career fair, whether it's Recruit Military or Hire Military or whatever is out there, you go to a career fair, you shouldn't just go to the career fair to see who's there or to pick up the swag off the table, right? They have that there purposely. You know what? That's to take the Tango whiskeys or the time wasters. That's to get them out of the way for the people that they really want to talk to. But if you go to a career fair, you should know which recruiter is going to be there, what jobs they have available or they're looking to fill. And if you're really fortunate, you can actually get their names as well. And go to the company website and say, hey, I applied for this when you first speak to the recruiter. You have to do your due diligence because that is a huge part. And it shows that hiring manager and the recruiter that you are someone who can function and be productive without supervision, because that is probably one of the best and most notable veteran skill sets that they are looking for. They look for people that don't need to be handheld, but at the same time, always remember that there is nothing wrong in asking for assistance. You can go to a company, you can look at their veteran employee resource group if you feel more comfortable speaking with veterans. But as you build your network around you, keep in mind that it doesn't have to be all veterans in your network. In fact, I encourage you to make sure that you have a well-balanced network of people who served and then people who have never served, because that is going to complete you. It's going to make you a little bit stronger, and it will put you in a position where you can communicate with everyone, regardless of their background and regardless of their experience. Thank you so much for your time. This meeting has been recorded and will be shared with all the participants along with our speakers, Noel and Nikita. Thank you very much for your time. This concludes today's VetNet.
Thank you.